Hello, everyone. So nice to be here with you all today for a nice lunch break Yale Alumni Live. My name is Stephanie, and I am a member of the regional clubs team at the Yale Alumni Association and the host of Yale Alumni Live. This is a really special day. Today, we have a very full house coming to us live from West Point Academy and our friends from the Yale Club of Mid-Hudson Valley. We have a really full house of guests today who are going to tell us about their Yale experiences and their West Point experiences. Today we have two sponsors, co-sponsors of this event, and I want to tell you a little bit about them before we get into our program. For those of you who have watched Yale Alumni Live before, you know that we have featured the USS Constitution in Boston and the USS Hopper out in Hawaii. And we've done that in partnership with the Yale Veterans Association, which is one of the shared interest groups that runs out of the Yale Alumni Association. And I'm just going to take a moment to tell you a little bit about the Yale Veterans Association, which is an alumni-driven shared interest and identity group with a 501c3 nonprofit status, representing a community of some 10,000 Yalies who are military veterans or actively serving members of the armed forces of the United States and its allies and our friends. Our regional chapters include New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., and Houston. The Yale Veterans Association is committed to supporting and uplifting the veteran community, improving U.S. civil-military relations, addressing salient issues relating to veterans and national security, and reaffirming Yale's highest tradition of leadership and service to the nation. And I could tell you that there is a wonderful connection between Yale and West Point, and that's what we're here to explore today with our guests. And I'm also really thrilled to be joined by the president of the Yale Club of Hudson Valley, JC Calderon, who is a member, who is the president of this revitalizing club. So JC, just introduce yourself, tell everybody what you've got going on at the Yale Club of Mid-Hudson Valley. Well, you got to unmute. I mean, as many times as we've all done this, it happens to all of us. Go ahead, JC.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. So happy to be here. So yeah, the Mid-Hudson Valley Club has been an existing club, but we're trying to re-energize it. And I am the relatively new president of the club. We represent over 700 alumni, not as big as the Veterans Association, but we still have a lot of potential to do things in the Hudson Valley, and West Point is within our territory, so to speak. And so we're happy to sponsor this event today and learn more about West Point and its relationship to Yale. And so we are going to be hosting an event on April 15th. So look out for an email from the Yale Alumni Association about that April 15th event, where we're going to just basically have a meet and greet and try to get people more involved in the club and events.
Great. Thank you so much, JC. It's a pleasure to have you and club members from Mid-Hudson Valley here with us today. And I just want to remind everybody that wherever you are, if there is a Yale club in your area, you are a member, and we encourage you to get involved with the club because it's a great way to stay connected to the university. So I'm just going to do a quick housekeeping bit, and then I'm going to introduce you to everyone that we have here with us today. So those of you who are watching on Facebook, feel free to put comments or questions into the running stream right under our video, and those of you who are watching in Zoom, feel free to put questions in the chat or the Q&A. So I guess without further ado, I would love to introduce our guests here today, and I'm just going to start with Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Faint, who has been instrumental in getting this group together for us today. He has been my contact at West Point. We've had a lot of really great chats, and we were just talking earlier today that this has been months in the making between holidays and different things that have come up throughout the calendar. We're just so happy to have all of you here today. And you can see on the screen, we are joined by Cadet Isabel Mbola, Dr. Rachel Sondheimer, Captain Hannah Smith, Colonel Rich Morales, and Dr. Robert Person. So they are going to tell you their Yale story and their West Point story. And we're going to explain to you guys how this all connects. So Charlie, over to you to tell us about yourself. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you so much, Stephanie, for getting this all together. And like you said, this was a long time coming, and I'm just grateful to be here to share my own Yale experiences and talk about West Point. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to West Point. As Stephanie said, my name is Charlie Faint. I'm an active duty U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel currently stationed at the United States Military Academy at West Point, or USMA as we call it. And it is my true pleasure to be here with you today to talk about the Yale-West Point relationship and why it matters. So I'm going to take about 10 minutes of your time to talk about my own Yale memories in order to help set the stage for this event and to frame the follow-on discussions. When I'm done, we have a short video about West Point, and then you'll hear from several of my West Point colleagues about their own experiences at Yale and what life is like at West Point. At the end of all that, I'm looking forward to the question and answer period because I'm sure you'll have a lot of very interesting questions for us. So here at West Point, I'm the Deputy Director of the Modern War Institute, and I teach a class called Comparative Defense Policy in the Defense and Strategic Studies major. As you can probably tell from the pennant behind me, I'm also a Yale grad. Specifically, I completed a Master of International Relations with the Jackson Institute in 2013 before coming here to West Point to teach. I taught at West Point for 5 years, took a little side trip to Hawaii with U.S. Army Pacific for 2 years, and now I'm back again. And I think that many people are surprised to learn that there are a number of Yalies, military and civilian, teaching here at West Point, including some who you'll hear from shortly, who have been here significantly longer than me. You'll get to meet some of them because this Yale Alumni event features 4 Yalies who are professors or administrators at West Point, as well as 1 West Point cadet who we hope is a Yalie to be. The theme of this Yale Alumni Live event is to talk about Yale-West Point relationship and why it's so important. And to start off this discussion, I thought it might be useful for me to talk a little bit about my own personal Yale journey. My family's from Huntsville, Alabama. I was born into a military household and I moved around frequently. We lived overseas and spent a lot of time at Fort Bragg, which is located near the town of Fayetteville, North Carolina. After graduating from Mercer University in Macon, Georgia, I was commissioned in the Army and began my military career. And that means, plot twist, that I am not a West Point graduate. I completed the Reserve Officer Training Corps program, or ROTC. My wife Lola is also a Mercer grad, and she spent 10 years in the Army as well. Our daughter Emily is a junior in high school and wants to attend West Point, and our youngest daughter Shannon, and I hope you all don't hate me for this, little Shannon wants to attend Harvard. But enough about Harvard, let's talk about Yale. So my Yale journey was unexpected. I was a lackluster student in undergrad, and honestly, I only went to college because my father told me it was the only way that I could become an Army officer like him. I mostly majored in partying, and it took me 5 years to earn my 4-year degree. But I really started to get my act together when I began pursuing online master's degree programs through the Army's tuition assistance program. About halfway through my first master's, I found out that the Army had a program that let officers teach at West Point, and they would even send you to graduate school for free. What a deal. So I first started applying to teach at West Point during my second tour of duty in Iraq. At that point, I was assigned to the Joint Special Operations Command and had also been at Afghanistan 4 times. Due to the nature of my work in those countries, I got to see a lot of what was going on in the global war on terror, and I also had a lot of time to think. One of the things that I realized was that the wars weren't going particularly well, and in my opinion, outside of JSOC, we were making some pretty serious strategic level mistakes. Now, that was very easy for me to say as a middle management armchair quarterback who didn't have the burden of making strategic level decisions for our military and for our nation. But it was a thought I had nonetheless. As a military intelligence officer, I knew that my chances of influencing future policymaking and military planning was frankly quite limited. But one place that I thought I could really make a difference would be to help educate future Army leaders and help them avoid some of the same mistakes we were making in the war on terror. So West Point is the smallest commissioning source of Army officers, but is overrepresented in the general officer ranks. Most of the highest ranking Army officers are West Pointers. So if I wanted to help make a difference in the future, West Point seemed like a logical place to be. So I applied to teach at West Point and I got rejected. I applied the next year and got rejected. 3rd time's a charm, right? Wrong, but at least this time I got waitlisted. And eventually West Point called me up and then it was time to apply to grad school. Now friends, I got rejected from some of the finest grad schools in the nation, but ultimately I got accepted by only 2 schools, Texas A&M and Yale. I was super happy about Texas A&M. Texas in the South, those are my people. The furthest north I ever lived up to that point was Virginia. I wasn't so sure about living way up north where things are very different than what I'm used to. And never in my wildest dreams did I think about going to Yale. Yale wasn't for people like me. I didn't even know that much about Yale, except that it had a great reputation, was super liberal, and the military wasn't welcome there. Or so I thought. With all that in mind, I also knew that General Stanley McChrystal taught at Yale. General McChrystal commanded JSOC when I was assigned to the unit, and I had a lot of respect for him. He was one of the strategic leaders that I felt really got it when it came to Iraq and Afghanistan. And in fact, the only reason I applied to Yale was because he taught there. I figured if Yale was good enough for him, then it was good enough for me to at least apply to. So I applied, and I don't think anyone was more surprised than I was that I got accepted. So at 40 years old, After 16 years in the Army and 7 combat tours to Iraq and Afghanistan, I found myself at Yale. And I admit I was a bit apprehensive. I was anticipating antipathy for my military service, that I wouldn't be able to relate to my fellow students, and I was even having wild ideas of having to fight hippies on the green every Friday, or ridiculousness like that. I was sure that my fellow students wouldn't like me and wouldn't even try to like me. All of that, of course, was ridiculous. And even as an older politically conservative war veteran, I had a great experience at Yale. My classmates were wonderful people, I learned a lot, and I felt blessed every day to be surrounded by some of the best minds the world had to offer. I also had a lot of classes with undergrads who were particularly curious about my military experiences. As a son and grandson of military officers who had spent more or less his entire adult life in the Army, it boggled my mind that so many Yalies had never even met anyone in the military before. It occurred to me that Yale grads are the types of people who grew up to run the country, and that people like me ultimately ended up working with the kinds of people I was in class with. So my wife Lil and I took it upon ourselves to befriend these young leaders. We spent a lot of time with them at school, invited them over to dinner parties at our house, and generally just tried to engage with them at every level. I figured the novelty factor would be good to get them over to the house for at least one visit, but they kept coming and they kept coming. In fact, the last big event we had at my house, which is a veterans and friends house party, so many undergrad friends showed up and we were all having such a good time that for the first time in 20 years, I started to get worried that the cops might show up to tell us to tone it down. So yeah, I had a pretty good time at Yale. But it wasn't all just a big party. I did a lot of learning and growing while I was in grad school. While I was the first military veteran that many of my classmates had ever met, there were a lot of firsts for me as well. For example, at Yale, I had my first observant Jewish friends, my first openly gay friends, my first Pakistani friends. I didn't make any gay, Jewish, Pakistani friends at Yale, but maybe one day. At any rate, the point is we all made each other better and we all accepted each other for who we are, not where we came from. I'm grateful for my time at Yale and thankful to have had that experience. Many of you know that Yale is just a short drive away from West Point, so once I started teaching in the Department of Social Sciences in the fall of 2013, I returned to New Haven many times and hosted Yalies here at West Point as well. But my main way of maintaining the Yale-West Point connection was through PDLI, the Peace and Dialogue Leadership Initiative, a joint Yale-West Point endeavor that selects some of the top students from both schools for Yale Alumni Fellowship that includes 2 weeks on the ground in Israel and the Palestinian territories. PDLI is now in its 7th year, and I was the faculty advisor for 5 of those years and accompanied the PDLI fellows overseas 5 times. When I was stationed here the last time, we also co-sponsored a series of civil military conferences at both Yale and West Point, along with the Yale Veterans Association, and we even did it once down in Princeton. So, why do I do all that? Because, friends, the West Point and Yale connection matters. Both schools have a very long tradition of service to the nation, military or otherwise, and graduates of both schools go on to be the leaders in politics, business, public service, and the nonprofit sphere. It's helpful that graduates of both these schools see each other as colleagues and not competitors, and they integrate when they're young, so the first time they deal with each other isn't when they're working together on a battlefield, a boardroom, or at the president's daily brief. I'm happy to do my part to promote civil military relations and the Yale-West Point connection. I'm coming to the end of my time, but before we go to a quick West Point video, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Stephanie Stevens and the Yale Alumni Live program, Jim Levinson of the Jackson Institute, and especially Henry Kwan, Adrian Bonenberger, and my longtime friend Tom O'Pladen from the Yale Veterans Association for the work that they do and so many others do to keep West Point and Yale's relationship strong, connected, and working together. Once again, welcome to West Point. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Charlie. You know, I'm glad you didn't get into any fights on the green and that you had a positive Yale experience. I want to just take a moment to tell everyone watching about a alum from the class of 2011. And I don't know if any of you guys know, Jesse Rising is his name. Jesse has done a really incredible thing. For those of you who know Jesse's name or have heard him talk before, he joined us on Yale Alumni Live actually on Veterans Day. Jesse was injured during the game, which prevented him from enlisting in the service, which he had intended to do. So instead, he started a group called the Warrior Scholar Foundation, which helps military veterans enlist in educational opportunities. And it's a really incredible organization. And Jesse's story is fascinating. So anybody who doesn't know about Warrior Scholar Foundation, I encourage you to, or project, excuse me, I encourage you to check it out, because that is a big question for people, is how do you go from your military experience into the educational environment? Because it is so different, as Charlie alluded to in his conversation. So I don't know, Charlie, do you have any other thoughts you want to add to that? The experiences that you've seen or tried to help guide through for people who are in your shoes?
So just one comment on that. I know Jesse. Jesse was in school when I was here. Jesse's a super guy. And last I checked in with him, he was doing great things for the country as a lawyer. I think he was an assistant DA somewhere. So Jesse, an incredible guy, Warrior Scholar, incredible program. And I'm very grateful that Yale does so much for veterans. So we talked about the Yale Veterans Association. We talked about Yale Alumni Live. But I think Yale is a great school for vets. And what I don't think Yale does, or at least didn't do when we were there, is they don't do a great job of reaching out to vets to encourage them to come here. You heard from my own story that I would not have applied to Yale. I would not have gone. Like, I wanted to go to Texas A&M, I wanted to go to Duke, I wanted to go to University of Alabama. But General McChrystal was at Yale, so I applied to go to school there. Many vets are like me and can't see themselves going to school like that. That's for somebody else. So what I try to do, and what I know a lot of my colleagues here and in the audience try to do, is encourage vets to come to Yale. Yale's a great school. You got the Eli Whitney program, you got Yale Ribbon, you got the GI Bill, you got all these things that are going in your favor. So to my veteran friends out there, apply to Yale. Yale's a great school for us as veterans, and it's full of great people. And I think you'll have a similar experience to me. And Stephanie, I think that's probably all I need to talk right now, because I know my colleagues have a lot to say also. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And we're going to show a quick video, a West Point video. And I just have to say that I know that both Charlie and a few of our other guests here today have already been encouraging Izzy, who is a cadet currently at West Point, to become a Yalie. So everybody else who's watching can encourage her as well, because we'd love to have her. And you all are going to hear from her in a few short moments. So I'm going to share a video now that is pretty impressive. So if for some reason you guys can't hear this or see it, flag me down, but I think we should be good to go. So please enjoy this brief video.
And your task is clear. It is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to defend the American people. And you will do that through readiness for combat. You didn't come here to play ping pong. You came here to learn how to fight, and fight you will. You are this nation's next greatest generation. You're an amazing group of people. You possess the same competence, the same compassion, and the same character as those who have gone before you in the long gray line here at West Point. Among you is a future president, senator, or members of Congress and captains of industry, entrepreneurs and scientists. But most importantly, among you are our future platoon and company and battalion, brigade, division, and corps commanders. And each of you will be taking a lifelong oath no matter what the pressure, no matter what the cost to yourself, your career, or even your life, you must never waver. Your competence, compassion, and character are going to be tested. You're going to operate in unbelievably miserable and Spartan conditions. And you're going to make decisions in incredibly morally ambiguous situations. And you're going to be fighting against a dedicated, ruthless enemy who is going to give you no quarter. But like those that came before you, you're going to prevail. And you will win.
Okay. Hopefully you all enjoyed that video. And I have to say that I've watched this video a couple times, in preparation for today. And every time I watch it, I'm just so grateful for those who provide their service to our country. So thank you all so much for what you do for us. And now I would love to introduce Colonel Rich Morales, who is an SOM grad, who is going to tell us about his Yale experience and a little bit about West Point and the Army as a career. So Colonel Morales, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very amped up after watching that video. So let's go. Let's learn more about West Point.
Well, that's great. Can you hear me okay before I continue?
Yes. Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Great. So I got my little SOM mug, which is a deep mug. Listen, it's great to be with this group. I mean, there's so many people to follow, and I'd really love to get to your questions. The first I'll say is I'm certainly the old person in this group, right? And I love that in many ways Yale is so different than West Point, yet so similar. I came to West Point. I'll give the quick version. We all have little bios. I spent a year with 50,000 of my closest friends at the University of Texas at Austin, where sort of that ratio of 301 didn't quite fit for me. I ended up coming up here to Shawshank on the Hudson, and it was a great fit. It's a place that I fell in love with, West Point, when I first got here as a cadet, first person in my family to go to college, very unfamiliar with snow, all the cliches you could think of. My father delivered milk for a living. We're not a military family. My parents flew up to West Point exactly once to watch me graduate. And it was only then that they sort of understood, what the place was about. And it isn't that I didn't share, it's very hard to contextualize what West Point is for America as an institution and what it is an experience for the cadets and the amazing faculty here. I'm going to try not to duplicate, sort of the great stuff that Charlie's already talked about and the things that those that follow might say. So I'm trying to give you a sense for what it's like to be inside the walls here. If you went on the Constitution to get an idea of what that's like, I'm going to give you what I think is the inside view. When I came to West Point, I was dating my wife, who I met in kindergarten, who's I think on this call, who I love. And when she came up here, she would stay with my sponsors, right? So that started this tradition that we have here, which I love, which is sort of what Charlie mentioned. So there's this family within the, really weird ecosystem where folks open their house to my wife, to save for cost and to kind of explain this army that she may or may not be part of. She had a chance to escape and she didn't. She married me, and it's been a great journey. That journey has, I studied aerospace engineering here, which probably, if I had to do it over again, I probably should have done something a little less draining on my brain, but it was a great experience. I left here, and Chrissy and I have been stationed 14 different places. Within each assignment, we've probably had 3 jobs. So if you do math in public, that's, 40 some odd jobs, constantly changing. And that would be a theme that I have, is change. Certainly change for the sake of change isn't great, but change is a constant, which is a little paradoxical. In the Army, I served as an armor officer. I've spent a lot of time deployed in one swath, most recently 1,187 days, broken up over 5 years, which was really about 3 years, almost continuously deployed. I think the theme of the academy is not sort of what someone might think of in a movie, where it's just all about sort of this crucible of ground combat, which you heard General Milley. It's not quite ping pong either, as he said. But it's something actually quite special. It's service to the nation. It is not just the military, it's the civilians. You see some, Rachel's, I'm her warm-up act. She's terrific, right? She knows more about the military profession than I do, and I'm in it. But I'm just kind of going through the motions. She thinks much deeper about it. It's been a great experience. And it's one, I think it has been in some ways typical, in some ways atypical. I've had a chance to work at the very senior levels of our nation. I worked at the White House twice. I came to work on 9/11 at the White House. I started there on the 6th of September, 2001. And I got to watch the government sort of freeze in place and then start to kind of respond, right? I was a White House fellow. There's 12 of us. We sort of were, front row seat to history. And my classmates, very diverse, different parties. I have classmates that I politically agree with, others that I don't. And it's a very odd topic for us in uniform, because generally our politics are pretty deep, but our perspectives are not. I later came back to work at the White House again. I was President Obama's policy aide, and I got to spend time with, the President, the First Lady, now President Biden, on some really great, I thought, and certainly, not from a political perspective, but some great policy to advance opportunities for veterans, their families as they transition in education, employment, and wellness. So those are sort of two contrasts. I spent a whole lot of time getting shot at and trying to shoot back, leading small formations, learning as I went, ultimately leading a 1,000 person battalion spread across a third of Baghdad, with all the exhilaration, and I don't say that in a glorification of violence, and all the heartache that brings. And I heard something today on a separate call with cadets that said, the process of being in the military is akin to doing really hard stuff that builds up some calluses so that the little stuff doesn't seem to matter anymore. It's mentioned in my bio that I have a Purple Heart. That's the I Forgot the Duck award. What that really does for me, it's really hard to have a hard day after that day. Every day I try to do my very best. I'm certain to disappoint some people, including myself, and then I just move on. So that's sort of my army. I want to, in a shorter time, and I don't have this terribly prepared, but I did want to share some thoughts about how I really believe that Yale is, if I had to think, it's one of the top 5, finding and convincing my wife to say yes is certainly one. My kid who's born after almost 20 years of marriage is 2, but Yale's up there in the top 5. And I'll tell you why, and it's not unfamiliar to the people on this call. It really changed how I think and how I lead. So if I've bounced around 14 different places, so place matters. I came to Yale from having been a UN peacekeeper, which is a great experience working with a lot of different nations. But it's really about perspective. Just like Charlie said, it is about understanding people that are very different than me. As much as we think that we've got this really diverse mix in the military, we don't. We don't, because we just don't. It's not, it is just the structure of the thing. So those skill sets, networks, I happened to go to the Yale School of Management. The dean at SOM at the time, Jeff Garton, probably more famous, just like me, the best part of him is not him, it's his wife. She's Ina Garton, the Barefoot Contessa. He was a Special Forces A-team leader in Vietnam. And as a consequence, he always took the veterans under his wing. I TA'd for a guy named Al Stam. He was a class called Strategy, Technology, and War. And I see Rachel nod. And he was, for a bit there, the Dean of Leadership and Public Policy down at UVA. I would say that Yale provided me and afforded me opportunity to meet people that I'm still in contact with, not in a networky opportunist way, but in a, me well, what should I do? I'm at a crossroads, do I go left or right? And that's something that's unreplicable. I'll try to wrap up. I mean, it's fascinating. The very first person I sat next to at business school, because I wanted to absolutely meet people that were different, was this guy with a beard. And I kind of leaned over to him and I said, "What do you do, partner?" And he said, "I'm a helicopter pilot." Oh, okay. Well, what are you doing next? "I'm going to teach at West Point." So in a class of 200, I sat next to the one knucklehead that was going to do the exact same thing I was going to do. So much for my great plan. Scott Bemis is now the head of HR at Dartmouth and has used his Yale experience to really sort of broaden his perspectives. The last one I want to talk about is Laszlo Bach. Laszlo was my ECOMSET problem partner. He went on to be like the 115th person hired at this little company called Google. And he ran HR for Google. So when I'm stuck, when I have a decision, big or small, I would call someone like Laszlo to this day. Couldn't be more different, has this amazing perspective from the private sector. And I would say the same for our faculty. I know I said I was going to wrap up, but I got one quick plug on what Yale meant to me from a faculty perspective. They really cared. We sing ourselves to sleep in the military about how we've got this monopoly on leadership and caring. False, right? Sharon Oster, who probably, I'm certain, was not a big fan of the wars in Iraq that I was fighting, never stopped her from filling up boxes and boxes of stuff to send me and my soldiers, to send the most thoughtful notes, to really look after me while I was gone. She was my competitive strategy professor. Art Swersey, probably responsible for how I teach, and I love him and the people there. It was just a great experience. I'd love to hear your questions. I know that we're, trying to each get our little story. That's my story. I'm a huge Yalie at heart. I know this is about West Point, but Yale's a huge part of my equation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colonel Morales. So I just have a quick question for you. I know you said you had to convince your wife to come with you to New Haven, but was it a hard decision for you to enroll at Yale like it was a little bit for Lieutenant Faint?
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, it was easy peasy. You know, I'm sure I was waitlisted. I was waiting for MIT. I was waitlisted at MIT, Wharton, and Yale. I got into a couple other places. It was a no-brainer. Christy commuted down to Columbia while I was at Yale, so she was a grad student at Columbia while I was at Yale. So she's a Metro North writer. It just, everything about it felt non-HBSy. No offense to HBS, but it seemed to me to be leadership for society, something bigger. And sometimes that's only, nowadays website deep, but everything about Yale spoke to they were going to take me in, and it felt exactly right for me. The business school is only 200 people. I took a class at the law school, and my instructor argued before the Supreme Court. You can't make it up. The opportunities that it provided are life-changing. So no hesitation at all.
I would have to agree. And I love your story about sitting next to a classmate who was also following a similar path, because, what we're trying to do through Yale Alumni Live is connect people through storytelling. And I think there are so many more things that bring us together than separate us. So that was a great example of that. Thank you so much for sharing and for being with us today. And like you said, you were the warm-up for Dr. Rachel Sondheimer, who we are going to bring up now, who is in fact a civilian teaching at West Point. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her Yale experience and what it's like teaching at West Point. So Dr. Sondheimer, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here, and I am, as always, honored to get to work with people like Rich and everybody else on the call. So he's being very humble in saying that. So I think I'll start just with how I was drawn to Yale and then move into where I am now and what I do, because I think it very much dovetails with what Rich is talking about. I was drawn to Yale in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. I earned a Ph.D. in political science, and I was drawn there because of the faculty in political science and the things I was interested in terms of studying American politics. And it didn't disappoint. I was able to find a wonderful dissertation advisor and then also research group that I found incredibly supportive. And I think that group where we all kind of grew up together in terms of mentorship, and we were true partners in research and in life and outside activities. And I feel like everybody cared about the whole person. And that was really important, and something that really drew me to West Point eventually, in terms of caring about the whole person, caring about the entire cadet experience, who that person is as a student and what they're going to be as an Army officer, and also who the faculty are and how we develop and think about them as whole people. So I graduated from Yale in 2006, and West Point wasn't a slam dunk in terms of thinking about whether or not I should teach there. And that's an important point, because I think both Charlie and Rich have talked about fitting in and going somewhere different. And for them, Yale was the different place. And for me, West Point was the different place, right? Civilian through and through. I often say I wasn't a civilian until I stepped on post. I was just Rachel. And now I'm a civilian at West Point, surrounded by military. And as I said, it wasn't an easy choice. 2006, don't ask, don't tell was still the law of the land. And I grew up the daughter of a gay father. And so I had to think about whether or not I wanted to join and be part of an organization that wouldn't necessarily accept outwardly the person that I love the most in life, right? So how do you square that? And I came to it saying, I have a voice, I have an opinion, I have a view, and I can be a role model. And people deserve that, right? And I need to learn as well for people that might disagree with how I think. And I think Yale empowered me in a lot of ways to have that inner voice and to say I can do this, and I'm grateful for that. And I've never looked back. And it's an amazing place to be. And one of the things that's been awesome was that once we were moving towards eliminating Don't Ask, Don't Tell and allowing open service, I got to work on that. I got to provide some perspective. And so that was unbelievable and not something I could have imagined. So that's been really cool. In terms of what I do now, so I started as an assistant professor in the Department of Social Sciences. Rob Person will talk to you. Charlie Faint was in the Department of Social Sciences. It's an awesome place, teaching American politics. And since I teach, right now I'm teaching a media and politics class. I taught campaigns and elections. That's sort of where I am But right now I'm actually sitting in the dean's office. I'm the vice dean for academic affairs and a professor of political science. So I'm one of the highest serving civilians within the academic program, where I oversee the academic curriculum. I oversee faculty development, the research program, all of our assessment and reaccreditation, which people usually don't find that interesting, the writing program, and our graduate scholarship program. So I get to oversee a lot of the academics that look a lot like any other school in terms of performance. We have 13 departments, of which Rich is the head of the Department of Systems Engineering. We have 36 different majors, ranging from the humanities and social sciences. We have an English major, a philosophy major, we have a cyber major, we have a space science major. And it's just a great place, right? We have 27 different research programs, research centers, doing research on all sorts of different things and different aspects of knowledge that can be applied both to the Army and to society broadly. So it's just been a place I never expected to be, but I think that all of my experiences, both in undergrad and then in graduate school at Yale, really empowered me to be here and to be able to work with cadets and work with faculty like the ones that we have on this call.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Your story is very fascinating, and it's amazing that you were able to work on an initiative that was so near and dear to you. So I just have one question, because I know we have two other faculty members, but you oversee so much of what goes on in academic life. Could you share with us just some similarities that you see between Yale students from your time at Yale and students at West Point?
Sure. Let's think about that, Yale. And I think that when you go to either Yale or West Point, you're not just going for one thing, right? You're not just going for the academics. You're not just going for, at West Point, the military, right? You're going for that full student experience. And I think that both groups want to be that. They want to give their whole person and want to be shaped by that and contribute to the shaping of others, because it's not just about what you're getting out of that experience. I think both Yalies and cadets really understand that they're not just in that receive mode, that they're in the give mode. They're about developing each other, right? They're about that peer experience, and they're about helping even to develop faculty, right, through their interactions and engagements. So I think that idea of going in sort of wholeheartedly and jumping into that experience is something that both Yalies and West Pointers have in common.
Thank you. That perfectly exemplifies what we are talking about here today, is that connection between the two. And I really appreciate you joining us today. And now I'm going to introduce everyone to Dr. Robert Person, who is also a faculty member at West Point, and he's going to tell us his Yale story. So Dr. Person, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you, with my colleagues, and everybody watching. So I think it's particularly appropriate, the sequencing of today's event, because in a lot of respects, I've been following Rachel Sondheimer for a long time, and clearly, I mean, she's far too humble, like everybody else on this call. She has been really sort of leading the way and breaking a lot of new ground and forging new paths that certainly have helped me. So I actually first met Rachel when I was visiting Yale, trying to decide whether this was where I wanted to go to graduate school. And she and some of her classmates did a great job selling it. And it was clear that Yale was the place for me. So I also got my Ph.D. in the political science department. My specialty is sort of a mix of comparative politics, international relations, and especially the politics of Russia and the post-Soviet space. And so, what drew me to Yale, obviously was the extraordinary high quality of the university as a whole, the graduate school, and of course the poli-sci department. And it was many wonderful years that really sort of thrived there in New Haven. I will say I often think back to my time there, and I think about what I miss the most. And I'll be honest with you, and I don't know if any of my colleagues on the call feel the same way. It's the food. Again, so West Point, unfortunately, we're kind of located in a little bit of a culinary dead zone. And I think back to those years in New Haven, when you've got incredible options, a Thai restaurant on every corner, and really sort of everything, from around the world, and not just the restaurants and the food, but the extraordinary, cultural scene, arts opportunities, things like that. So, again, New Haven, historically has, I think, an unfair reputation, but really a town that punches above its weight, and so miss the white clam and bacon pizza at Pepe's, but we try to get back there every once in a while to enjoy it. So my story of how I ended up at West Point, because again, it is sort of an unusual pathway. And sort of a unique place that's not necessarily on the radar of most PhD students looking for jobs. But my story is a little bit sort of characteristic of why West Point has been such a good fit. So when I was at Yale, I was actually, as a graduate student, I was on the Yale skeet and trap team. It's one of Yale's club sports. It's actually the second oldest continuing operating collegiate shooting team or shotgun team in the country, second only to the West Point skeet and trap team, which was founded 2 years prior in 1938. At the time, when I was in grad school in the 2000s, Yale and West Point were kind of the last two teams in the region. And so, we had a healthy friendship and a healthy rivalry. And it was at one of our annual competitions when a couple of the coaches from the West Point team said, "Oh, hey, you're looking for a job in political science. Our Department of Social Sciences is hiring in international relations." And so I thought, well, sounds interesting. Sounds like fun. I'll put in an application. I also had the benefit, again, of being able to pick up the phone and have a chat with my friend Rachel Sondheimer and say, "Hey, what is this place? Is this, what's going on here? Is this what I want to do?" And got lucky. Put in an application. Was fortunate enough to be offered the job, and then sort of jumped into sort of this strange new reality. I often tell people that my first few years here, I kind of felt like an anthropologist. I had gone to a new sort of remote place, strange culture, new customs, strange language, all these acronyms and things like that. And so just sort of learning how to speak Army and learning a lot of the norms and traditions and culture of the military was something that was new to me, but fascinating. What has kept me here and what will continue to keep me here is, again, sort of following in Rachel's footsteps. She hit it on the nose, which is the mission that every single faculty member here, regardless of rank, regardless of civilian or military or field or background, every single faculty member is tasked with developing complete human beings. And in a lot of respects, and I think that sort of humanistic approach is a commonality with Yale's approach, but I think it goes even farther here at West Point. My responsibility to cadets and their development isn't limited to intellectual development. It's not limited to what goes on in the classroom. I have to continue working on that mission, even when I'm outside the classroom. So, it's about cultivating, the mind, but also, the body, and most importantly, character. And character development is such a critical piece of what we do. And that just really appealed to me, to say that, I'm part of a mission that is, cultivating complete human beings, future leaders of character that are going to lead our military and our country. And that sort of ties into the second thing that really has meant so much to me, which is to be involved in national service and to help contribute, I think, certainly what I believe to be the good of our country by working with these, extraordinary young men and women. A lot of people don't know this, but civilians like myself, on the first day of work, we raise our, I guess it's the right hand, we raise our right hand in front of the flag, and we swear the identical oath that our uniformed officer colleagues do, to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And every time I hear that oath reaffirmed when our graduates commission, it just sends tingles through my body, and an incredible gratitude to be able to be a part of that mission. So that's what brought me here. That's what's kept me here. I wanted to take a little bit of time just briefly to share with the listeners a little bit more about sort of civilian faculty and what that experience is like, and what role we play here. It is it is sort of unique. Again, we are in the minority in that civilians constitute about 20 to 25% of the faculty. About 20% are senior military faculty who are here on a long-term basis, like Colonel Morales. And then about 60%, give or take, are the junior rotating military faculty. And you'll hear from Captain Hannah Smith in just a moment. I will say that, just briefly getting back to that sort of cultivation of human beings and the mission, I have the pleasure. So I had the great pleasure of having Hannah as my own student my first year at West Point. And she's my first student to come back and actually teach on the faculty. And so again, you want to talk about a rewarding feeling of seeing, this kid that showed incredible potential as a cadet to go out, do awesome things in the Army, and really sort of establish her as a great leader of soldiers, and then come back and teach alongside and be able to call her a colleague is just about the most rewarding thing I think I could imagine in this job. So those are the different bins of faculty. But what I appreciate about this place is that, sort of contrary to the Army's traditional culture, they really sort of appreciate that all of us of different stripes and colors and types, we're all engaged in the same mission, but we all bring our unique talents and skills to the table and sort of contribute in different ways. And sometimes they call it sort of the blend of excellence, if you will. It's a little bit ironic because sort of the United States Army sort of has its industrial roots as a mass organization predicated on sort of interchangeable parts. But here at West Point, sort of they recognize that everybody brings something sort of special and unique that contributes to that mission. So the civilians, like myself, like Dr. Sondheimer, and others, sort of bring that deep disciplinary experience and expertise and a lot of pedagogical experience to the table. But we also bring our own profession to the table. We are professional academics, and some of those norms, standards, even traditions of the academic profession, often very different from those of the military profession. But I think sometimes that perspective, kind of adds another dimension and another facet to how we do things here. The other thing, and I'll sort of close with this, and again, sort of one of the ironies of being a civilian at West Point, is that our longevity sort of uniquely gives us a lot of perspective and a lot of institutional memory at this place, and I think it's no accident that so Rachel again was typically humble. She said, "I'm one of the most senior civilians." She is the most senior civilian in the academic program, and that's to some degree that institutional memory is a reflection of the fact that we are here on a long-term basis. And have a lot of perspective on an institution that is itself rooted in a lot of tradition. And so that's a unique element. I sometimes still say I'm probably about 24, 25 years away from retirement. And so, probably Izzy is the only one that will, that will still be in the Army by the time I retire from here. And so again, the honor of being able to uphold a tradition that stretches back, over 200 years and hopefully will continue deep into the future is truly something special. So I'll leave it at that, and I believe now I have the pleasure of passing it off to my good friend and colleague, Captain Hannah Smith.
Thank you so much, Dr. Person. I just have to say that as you were speaking, there were so many times where I felt like Yale and West Point were interchangeable in the delivery of academics and just well-rounded people, leaders for our world. So, I was also going to ask you what one of your favorite memories of teaching at West Point was, but it sounds like teaching Captain Hannah Smith and having her come back and teach with you. So I'm very excited to welcome Captain Hannah Smith. And as we were getting prepared for today, I realized that Hannah was the person most recently on campus as she graduated in 2020, as our whole world was kind of turned about. So Captain Hannah Smith, thank you so much for being here. Tell us about your Yale experience, because obviously your experience has been very different from everyone else's as you were at Yale amidst this pandemic. So talk to us about that, Captain Smith.
Sure, thank you. So first, thanks to everybody for signing on to this. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you to Dr. Person for giving me a shout out. I was going to say, if you think that you follow Dr. Sondheimer, then perhaps I'm following in your footsteps as well, as you were my instructor. And one of the reasons that I decided to go back and study at Yale, and I'm very thankful for your mentorship. So my name is Hannah Smith. I am a captain in the Army. I've been in the Army for about 9 years now. I graduated from West Point in 2012, and then I graduated from Yale, like Stephanie said, in 2020 with a graduate degree. For just a little bit of background on my Army career, I'm an intelligence officer, and I've served in Hawaii, North Carolina, and Arizona, and then I also have deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. I decided when I was a captain that I knew I wanted to go to grad school in some form or fashion. And I knew that there were several different ways that you can go to grad school through the Army. One of them is by going back to teach at West Point, because in order to teach at West Point, you have to get some type of graduate degree. So I applied to teach at West Point, and upon getting accepted there, the Army let me apply to different grad schools that I would get to take about 2. Sometimes people will take 3 years off to go to grad school, and then they end up serving for about 2 to 3 years as an instructor at West Point. So I'm one of those that you would consider like a junior faculty member that just rotates here for a couple years after going to grad school. So I applied to come teach back at West Point. I wanted to teach international relations, and fortunately that's what I was selected to come back and teach. And I applied to the Jackson Institute, their master's program in global affairs. And one of the reasons that I ended up picking the Jackson Institute to go to is I found out that I got accepted to Yale before all the other schools that I applied to, and I was actually about to go into the field for about a month and not have computer access. So it was kind of a lucky draw that I didn't really have a choice, but it turns out that Yale was the absolute best decision that I could have made. I had so many incredible experiences there and opportunities. So the Jackson Institute is a very small program, but all of the things that the individuals do there is unbelievable. I was very fortunate. I got to be a Carey Fellow, so I got to do research for John Carey for a year. I was a part of the Grand Strategy program, so I took a year-long study in this Grand Strategy where we had phenomenal speakers come in. I was also a teaching assistant for Howard Dean, which was really awesome, and then for another historian, Arnie Westad. And I also helped plan this Special Operations Forces Conference. So it's called the SOFCON now, but it's a program that's been going on for a couple years where several typically military individuals who are at Yale will help bring in some practitioners to kind of meet with the academic community at Yale and talk about what's going on in academia that can help us think about the future of special operations better. So I helped plan that as well. And then unfortunately, yes, so during my spring semester last year is when the pandemic hit and we did the rest of our classes online. So from March until May of last year, we were completely virtual, and that was a surprise to everybody. It ended up working out fine because we did have those relationships with everybody in the class previously. But it was a little bit sad that we couldn't exactly have a graduation together. And you do kind of miss out on some of those networking opportunities when you're unexpectedly thrown into this virtual environment. But I had an incredible experience at Yale, and I use a lot of what I learned at Yale in my teaching today. So I teach international relations, which is a core class. So that means that every cadet will go through and take an international relations class. I myself have almost 60 students right now that I teach international relations to, which is a lot, and a lot of grading. But I consistently find myself thinking of things that I learned at Yale and bringing it to the classroom, or talking about some of my classmates, or talking to some of my classmates from Yale and asking them what they think about certain issues that I'll end up bringing up in the classroom. And there's kind of two things I actually wanted to highlight for that relationship between Yale and West Point. So first, there's not an Army specific ROTC program at Yale. So there's an Air Force and a Navy one, but there's at least not an Army one headquartered there. And so I actually found myself a couple of times getting asked to talk to undergrad students about what the Army was like, because they didn't necessarily have the opportunity to understand the Army. They could get the Navy and the Air Force, but there were several who considered commissioning after or going through some type of officer candidate school after graduating and wanted to get that understanding of the Army. So I found myself being a spokesperson for just the Army in general. And the second thing is that I've been able to maintain a lot of relationships. I know I only graduated recently, but a lot of the instructors that I had, or individuals that I worked with, I have still contacted today to help me in my teaching. So for example, this morning, I actually had General Stanley McChrystal come talk to a class of cadets about leadership. And I did that because I took his leadership class at Yale, and he graciously agreed to speak this morning. I was also the research assistant and teaching assistant for Howard Dean, like I mentioned, and he and I have actually had several phone calls about how to address certain foreign policy issues in the classroom, because he teaches a politics of foreign policy course at Yale, and it sometimes goes hand in hand with international relations that I teach. So I have been able to keep some of those relationships and really use them in what I do here at West Point, that is building these leaders of characters that we strive to create here at West Point. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Captain Smith. You know, for so many people, this past year was a disappointment not being able to celebrate graduation, but you said something that reminded me, and I think all of us, that your Yale connection is forever. And I'm so glad that you're already seeing the fruits of that in your work now. And we're very excited to have one of all of your current students, Cadet Izzy Ebola, with us today. So I am going to invite her to come and introduce herself, and then we have a little bit of time for questions. I've so enjoyed hearing all of your Yale stories, and just so many common themes throughout and through all of the guests we've had on Yale Alumni Live. It's just so nice to see how we all stay connected to one another. So Izzy, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I know that everyone's probably very interested in what you have to say about the West Point experience. So tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thanks, Stephanie. And thank you for having me here today. So my name is Cadet Isabel Mbola. I'm a first D, aka senior at the United States Military Academy. Currently, I'm serving as the Brigade Executive Officer. So I work very closely with the Cadet Brigade Commander, who's in charge of all 4,000 plus cadets. I'm an international history and Arabic double major, and currently my mind is focused on my thesis. But a little bit about me and my journey to come to West Point. I am the eldest of 4 girls. My mom was enlisted in the Army for about 10 years. After graduating high school in 2014, I went to University of Georgia for a semester, and then enlisted afterwards as a 35 Papa, which is a cryptological linguist. my language was Modern Standard Arabic. And so I went to the Defense Language Institute at Monterey for 2 years, roughly 2 years. During that time, some enlisted mentors of mine encouraged me to consider West Point. And so I applied and got in and ended up coming to the Academy June of 2017. So that's a little bit about me. And then small connection to Yale. My sponsor at the Academy is actually Lieutenant Colonel Saint. And he met me the summer of my initial entry training to the Academy. And then that first semester as a freshman, I got to accompany him and a couple other cadets to Yale to sit in on General McChrystal's leadership class. So that's my connection to Yale, very limited as compared to the rest of the panel. But
that's okay, Izzy, because all I've heard for the past couple of months as we were preparing for this Yale Alumni Live today is that you are without a doubt a future Yalie, and I will let them deal with you behind the scenes if you choose otherwise, but we of course would love to have you. So I just want to ask you a quick question, Izzy, because I was watching the graduation video from the class of 2020 at West Point, and I learned a couple of things, and I would just love for you to share a little bit of what this has been like for you. There are two very special nights during your senior year, branch night and post night. And I would just love if you could tell us a little bit about your own branch night, what branch night is and what that means for your future, if you would.
Sure. So branch night is one of the milestones that every first D hits that final year at West Point. Throughout your time as a cadet, you put in preferences probably around 4 to 6 times. And you put in your final preferences the fall of your first year. My number one preference was military intelligence with a branch detail for armor. Branch detail is where you serve basically your lieutenant years in a maneuver branch and then move on to your base branch. So I ended up getting my first choice, yay. So I will be going to armor training after graduation in Fort Benning and then move on to Fort Stewart as my first duty station, which Fort Stewart is located close to Savannah, Georgia. Yeah, but what the night typically looks like, all first Ds gather in one location, and we normally have a keynote speaker and some representatives from our 50-year affiliate class. So for our class of 2021, our 50-year affiliate class is the class of 1971. And then everyone is handed an envelope. You can't see the inside of it. And on the card says your branch that you've been assigned. And we are all told to open the envelope at one time. And there's lots of tears. Some of them are happy, some of them are not happy. But yeah, that's a little bit about what that looks like.
And it sounds like you were quite happy with where you ended up. And I was asking Lieutenant Colonel Faint earlier, to tell me a little bit more about branch night. And he told me there's a reason why it's really special that this is the area in which you are going. Charlie, sorry, I feel like we're first name basis at this point. Would you mind telling us why that's special?
Yeah, that's so special, Stephanie, because many of these cadets come to West Point with something in mind that they want to do, right? They want to be armor, they want to be infantry, they want to be military intelligence. There's a number of different branches they can go into. So they work very hard for a very long time in order to get these branches. And it is a bit of a mystery. There is an order of merit list that figures into it, but the Army has a very complex algorithm for figuring out who goes where and what. So at branch night, and I got to go, I went every year I was here, the 5 years I was here last time, and I went to this last one where Izzy got her armor insignia. And it's so exciting to be there with those young people. That the Academy does a great job of building up the suspense, right? You're getting all these speeches and you're holding this envelope and cadets are trying to feel the brass insignia through the envelope, but it's too thick, you can't really tell what it is. And then at the given time, the command is given to open the envelope and there's this complete hush for 2 or 3 seconds. And then there's an explosion of cheering and drinking and congratulating or consoling, you know, whatever it needs to be. And it's just a real special time to watch that. We didn't do something similar to that in my ROTC unit. I think I came to class one day and my professor of military science said, okay, faint military intelligence detailed infantry. I was like, oh yay, but West Point really does a lot of things right in branch nights well, Stephanie.
And so Izzy's branch in particular has only been available to women for a short time. Is that right?
That's correct.
So Izzy, how do you feel about that? Does it even faze you? You're just ready to go, or have you given that any thought as you were making that selection?
I definitely think it's possible to not think about that as a woman. But I have a plethora of amazing mentors, officers, and civilians that are here who I've had the chance to talk to about, you know, what that really means. And I think one statement in particular stood out to me. One of my mentors said, the reason she's here is to keep the door open for those coming behind her. And so that's part of my motivation moving on into the armor world.
Well, it's really exciting to have female representation on this episode today because it is Women's History Month, and it also, we're on the heels of the 50th anniversary of women at Yale, and women can do anything. And I think it's amazing that you are going into that branch, Izzy, and we wish you so much luck. And, you know, we're coming to the end of our time together today, but I have to tell you all and everybody watching that I got an email while we were talking, and you have another colleague among you that just sent me an email to say that he is now at West Point. He joined over the summer and he was so excited to see this group because he had no idea there were so many Yalies. His name is David Frommer, and he is the Jewish chaplain and Hebrew language instructor. So find him and welcome him. And all of you need to go together to the Yale Club of Mid-Hudson Valley's event in the near future. Izzy, you're welcome as a future Yalie. We also got a couple of questions that I would like to share with you and a couple of comments as well. So I'm going to start with a question that came in early, and any of you are welcome to answer this. This is where it gets a little crazy, where we're hitting the unmute button, but feel free to jump in. So the question is, if multi-domain operations is the future and the present, how do your learning objectives for your students change? And do we need separate service academies? So I will throw that over to whoever would like to start.
Can I jump in on that one? I saw that question. It's a great question. So disciplinarily, I teach systems engineering. That's, you know, people have to Google that usually, but it is really about bringing different things together to improve the performance of systems, right? Which sounds like professor speak. But that question really is, if we're going to this more combined, joint, multi-domain, why do we have sort of different academies, right? So certainly not an efficient way to do it, to have Air Force, Navy. I think that it's a good question. You know, parochially, I would say we need them all because we need to have somebody to beat in a football game. But the reality is, I think that just like, you know, I'm super proud of Izzy that she's going to armor. I think you first have to establish a little bit of expertise in your domain to be able to provide multi-domain. If we sort of all start all mixed up in this you know, stew, you don't get the benefits. I mean, I can almost zoom out even further about, you know, sort of what makes us powerful is not just perspectives, but diversity, right? And that's not sort of just a phrase we use. You really, you know, I think I bring a very different perspective. If I was homogeneously clumped together too soon, my Texan wouldn't show up, my Latino wouldn't show up, my Yalie wouldn't show up, right? And I don't need 10 of me, right? These poor people don't need even one more of me, right? But I think that this distinction, right, in systems we have distinctions, I think is really important. Whether or not we could combine, merge, separate, maybe 3 academies is enough. Maybe we need a space academy. That would sound good to the ear. But that's my take on it. That from a scholar perspective, the co-creation of value, you need to have some domain expertise to be able to merge them to begin with. So I think we got it close to right. I'm old. Izzy will dismantle West Point and create 3 of them.
Thank you very much. I have 2 more questions and a comment that I'll share. The first question is for Dr. Sondheimer and Dr. Person. One of our viewers is an Army veteran, now Ph.D. student at Yale, who is on an academic career path. Having served in the military himself, he's repeatedly wondered about the possibility of teaching at one of the service academies or war colleges. He works in the Asian studies area and religious studies and history, so quite a few. Do you have any advice for him or others considering this career path?
Just to start working on reaching out to people that teach at service academies. One of the best conferences I think that bring people together is IUS. It's I can't remember what it stands for, the Inter-University Consortium for Armed Forces and Society. And it's just this, it's a great place to bring together people that teach at service academies, people that teach at the War College, people that are interested in civil military relations, and people that study all sorts of things kind of related to the military and related to society. So I think like kind of building those networks early is incredibly helpful. And I think, you know, always being open to opportunities is really useful. And just, I actually have to pop off in about 2 seconds, but I just want to reiterate what Rich was talking about and just talk a tiny bit about how we think about our core curriculum in terms of thinking about the future of war and multi-domain operations, is that we think really broadly. So we have a core curriculum of about 23 courses that everybody's required to take, but the goal is not vocational, right? It's skill building. So we think about how our courses build communicators, how they focus on ethical reasoning, how we focus on creative and critical thinking, lifelong learning, STEM, HSS, and disciplinary depth. And so the idea is that to build Army officers that will be agile and adept at adapting to whatever is thrown in front of them. So we don't really change the curriculum based on what the near-term target is. We hope to create cadet or graduates that can adapt based on what they're seeing into the future. So we create agility through the curriculum and through who we're creating, and so that we're not just fighting kind of last year's battle.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Totally okay if you have to run. We've talked a lot today and we've heard some wonderful stories. I have one last question in the interest of time that I do definitely want to get to, because it's about getting more involved with different activities through Yale and the Yale Veterans Association for Captain Smith, actually. So one of our viewers is interested in getting more involved with things like conferences and connecting military and academia, mentoring military interested students. Aside from Yale Veterans Association, do you have any resources that you would recommend or any connections that this person can make?
So I definitely have a recommendation here. I would say to head over to the Jackson Institute or sign up for their emails. Typically, there are 2 to 3 active duty military individuals that end up going to graduate school at Jackson, which is becoming a school, I think, in the next year or 2. But they have done a great job of linking in the military and academia. So they often host former military leaders for a lot of speaking events, and a lot of the military students who end up going there plan a lot of their events as well. So the Jackson Institute would kind of be my first place to go and see who is currently a student there, and to see like what activities are on the calendar for the Jackson Institute.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we've exceeded our time, but I told everybody that didn't matter because we just wanted to hear your Yale stories and weaving those Yale stories into your West Point stories. And I think you all have really aptly shown the connection between Yale and West Point and why it matters. And so I thank you all very, very much for being here. This has been recorded, so anybody who's interested is welcome to go back and watch it. It will be on the Yale Alumni Vimeo page, Yale Alumni YouTube. And so I would just say that we're going to hang out in Zoom for a few minutes if there's anyone who would like to stick around and say hello to any of our guests and remind everybody that tomorrow is a big day for Yale Alumni Live. We are going to be live on Instagram in the afternoon with the newest Handsome Dan. So I hope that all of you will join us in meeting our new mascot and his handler, Cassie Haro, who is actually Naval ROTC at Yale. So continuing on the theme, lots of great Yalies this week. Thank you all so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to be among friends and brilliant minds of Yalies. So thank you all so much for being here. We're going to hang out in Zoom and hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, guys. So we're off of Facebook, but we're still live in Zoom. So I don't know if there are any club members. I told them that they could pop on and say hello. So anybody who is watching in Zoom, if you wanted to come live on camera, you're welcome to do that. I know you guys probably have other things that you have to do, but how crazy is that I got an email right in the middle of the show that there was another person there? You guys, do you know him? Does anybody know him?
No, I'm aware that there were other Yalies here, but I didn't know him personally. And I'll make sure to make that connection.
Yeah, he was so, in his email, he's like, I'm just so excited. There are so many Yalies at West Point. So that's a wonderful benefit of these things, as you know.
We should ask the MPs at the gate. Excuse me, are you a Yale? All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, David's here. Do you want to come on and say hello, David? You just can raise your hand and then I can add you into video. I love it. Here he is. Hold on. I'm going to promote him to panelist so you all can say hello. Oh, man. He'll be coming on in just a second. If there's anybody else from the club who would like to say hello to our guests, you are welcome to do so. Here he is. Hello.
Hi. This is outstanding. I was only tracking Rachel because I'm the new Jewish chaplain here and she's Jewish, and so I'd made that connection, but I was not aware of this fantastic Yale community here.
Pretty fantastic.
I think there are at least 10 of us that are here. We couldn't have them all on the show today. But David, it's great to meet you. I had no idea you were a fellow Yalie.
I may be the only or one of the only undergrads who went through Yale, because it seems like everyone, at least on this group, did graduate work there.
I think so, right?
I think that's accurate.
Well, that's wonderful. It's so nice to make these connections. If there's anybody else watching that would like to say hello or ask any questions, you are more than welcome to join us on camera while we still have our guests live with us. I know you guys
come to West Point. Stephanie, you should come to West Point. We should host you. We have a porch that overlooks the Hudson River. We could have a little Yalie fest.
So I would absolutely love that. We'll also do something with the Yale Club of Mid-Hudson Valley, but I have to tell you, Colonel Morales, so yesterday, I was rushing home after picking up my children and 2 boys, and they are very interested in military. And so they don't listen to me, of course, but I said to them, you guys, we got to go. Mom has a call with someone in the military. And they were like, what? So Charlie was kind enough to say hello to them and show his uniform. And so I said to my oldest, who loves hockey, I said, you're not going to believe this, but they work at a college, and that college is military, but they also have a hockey team. And my son's head exploded. And he is like, what do you mean? There's hockey and there's military? So we're coming to a hockey game whenever that's a possibility.
Well, we look forward to seeing you.
So Stephanie, also, and Charlie is going to be your POC on this. When life gets back to normal, in the fall, I want to say usually it's September timeframe, we have this thing here, it's called a branch week. And it's an opportunity for, again, all of those 16 branches to send representatives to West Point. And it's kind of like a job fair for the cadets, and they get to wander around and kind of learn more about these branches. But the cool part is that they bring in all of their hardware. So like we're talking like tanks and artillery, big boom booms, and all the helicopters. They bring them right down onto the plane. And, you know, in the afternoons, get to walk around, poke the stuff, climb on it. And I bring my kids every year, and they absolutely love it. I love it. And so yeah, I'm pretty sure you could wrangle a personal tour of lots of cool stuff for your kids.
They would just be smitten. And I got to be honest with you, like obviously working in higher ed, I think often about, what the future holds for my children. And I was really thinking yesterday, like after Henry got so excited, I was like, man, this could be something that I could really steer him towards, and maybe his behavior will change and all of these things that could align. But, I have a great respect for what you do. And I've always been very passionate about Veterans Affairs. So, it seems like a slam dunk for my children, hopefully. So we have a couple guests. So please let me stop talking. Go ahead. Go ahead, JC. Did you want to?
Yeah, no, I just had to say, you spoke about your children. I have 3 nephews that are in an Army family in North Carolina, affiliated with Fort Bragg. My brother-in-law is a military person, and his 3 kids are all very much into ROTC, and they don't know about the relationship with ROTC and Yale. You mentioned it, someone mentioned it about the Navy and the Air Force, but not the Army. But I've always encouraged my sons. They've continued to do stuff with the military in NC State and throughout their graduate degrees. So anyway, it's exciting.